one day when the glory comes, it'll be ours. It'll be ours. Oh, one day when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory. To the heavens, no man, no weapon formed against, yes, glory is destined. Every day women and men become legends. Since they go against our skin, become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all, just ain't specific enough. One sundown, his spirit is revisiting us. True and living is us. This distance is us. That's why Moses sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it go down, we woman and man up. They say stay down, so we stand up. Shots we on the ground, the camera panned up. King pointed to the mountaintop, so we ran up. One day, when the glory comes, it'll be ours. It'll be ours. We will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory. Oh, yeah. Oh, glory. Oh. Now the war is not over. The victory isn't won. But the battle to the finish. And then it's all done. We'll fly glory. Oh, glory. Oh, we'll fly Selfless now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of the crowd. They march with the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we don't go hundreds of miles. From dark roads, he rose to become a hero. Facing the legal justice, his power was the people. Enemy is lethal, the king became regal. Saw a face of Jim Crow under a bald eagle. The biggest weapon is to stay peaceful. We sing, my music is the touch that we bleed through. Somewhere in the dream we had an epiphany. Now we right the wrongs in history. No one can win this war individually. It takes the wisdom of the elders and power of the energy. Welcome to the story. We call victory the coming of the Lord. Our eyes can see the glory. One day, when the glory comes, it'll be ours. It'll be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory. When it's all said and done, we will sing it. We will sing glory. When it's all said and done. We will sing, yeah. We will sing glory. We will sing glory. When it's all said and done, the victory will be won. Oh, glory. Yeah, glory. Victory is won. We're right, glory, yeah. Good morning. Good morning. It's great to be back together again with everybody. I hope you slept well. All right, I didn't, but I'm glad to know that you did. Rosemary and I have had a great conversation already this morning, talking about last night and what we want to do today, and we really appreciated all of the questions and all of the conversation that we had both during the session and afterward. You want to say good morning?
Good morning. It's wonderful to see you. I didn't sleep well either. But that's only because I never sleep well the first night in any hotel that I stay in, and since I'm only staying one night, that's kind of it. But I'm really glad to see you all. I want to thank you for all the wonderful feedback that we've gotten. Marla and I are having a lot of fun, just so you know. And it's an exciting chance for us to work together and to share the ideas that we've been kind of developing independently of one another, and to find out how much synergy there actually is. And some of the ideas that we've gotten, and we've got all kinds of plans already about stuff that we're going to do after this because of this conversation. I also want to lift up that there were people who had questions from yesterday who didn't get a chance to ask them. So like those people, we want to give you priority in asking questions when we get to the end of our presentation today. So we wanted to honor people's time, and there just wasn't enough time. We already ran over yesterday. But we want to make sure that if you have questions that didn't allow you to sleep last night, that you come up and get in the queue, okay? All right.
Would you like the chalice? Well, I'm going to queue up. I'll tell you what, for our reading, our chalice lighting, I want to show you some poetry. These are 5 poets that are slam poets in the Tulsa community who were not members of the church, although some have now since joined. But we've a couple years ago, started to invite these slam poets from the community, and every community has them. And it tends to be a young, diverse crowd of artists and poets to come in, and whatever theme we're talking about in a service, we'll talk to them, we'll say, we'd love to commission a poem. And we pay them something. They're happy to get paid for a poem, to have an audience for their poem. We put them up on YouTube afterward if with their permission, and they love the exposure. So it's a real win-win situation. It brings diversity into the services, and it's a great thing that any of us can do. And they do an amazing job, as you'll see this little medley of poems. But we're going to use that as our reading this morning as we light the chalice. And I would just ask, we would like just a moment of silence afterwards, so no need for any kind of applause. Just sit with what you've heard, and we'll take it. Rosemary will get up and start speaking to close the silence following the reading.
I take my poetry like I take my sermons and my news. No music. Give it to me with all the solemnity you can muster, so I feel nothing writhing in my veins but the cold and even blade of what's true. No melodies to move me. I see no point in being moved if there will be no movement. And as I watch the lifeless body of another unarmed child, I cannot move. Dear Ferguson, heard y'all had some trouble up there. And I'm just writing to say I'm as sorry as I am helpless. No, I'm writing to say I hope you don't sing. Not this time. It's been 1 week since one of your babies was forcibly escorted to final rest, breathless, bulleted, and bathing in blood. And I'm writing to say that as of 10:56 p.m. Central Standard Time, August 16, 2014, the unedited outrage of this callous injustice ain't even trending on Facebook no more. Don't sing, Ferguson. Not if you feel like you're drowning, feet floundering in wet cement, gasping just enough air not to choke on hopelessness as you fight to keep the canaries out of your windpipes. Don't sing. Because Ferguson, I'm starting to think that the savage beast soothed by music can never be slain. And this violently nonchalant disregard for our lives must die. In the back of your mind, educated, outspoken black folk like me are either uppity or lucky.
Or lucky that our uppity butts don't get locked up on trumped up charges. Or rocked to the bed of a pickup truck and dragged like James Bird until our wings are clipped and blood creates crimson color dividing lines in the road deeper the division in your prejudice mind. I know that the reason why some of y'all like to wear those hoods is to hide your insidious agenda, which is aligned with the anti-divine. And oh, you be fronting like you don't secretly envy me.
It's not my fault. It's not like I tried to be. But I'm the result of a racist society. I was raised and jaded by a culture that lied to me. You see, you lose if you confine your views to the news. You gotta learn to perceive more than what you see with your sight. Just listen for a second. You're gonna see that I'm right. See, if you ought to hit the switch and kill the beam of the light, then heard me speak on the mic. You know, good and well, some of y'all wouldn't think I was white. And because of that, you may think I'm a wannabe, a joke. Well, think what you will. But no, my real goal is hope, because we won't try to fix nothing unless we think that it's broke. See, it's not just the difference of being black or white. No, sometimes it's the difference of having dough and being broke. See, racism is why we walk down the street scared at night. Racism is perpetuating stereotypes. It's refusing to at least try to bury the strife. And racism isn't for any reason you care that I'm white. It's calling what happened back here in Tulsa a riot. You can't deny it. Why try it? Why even bother? What was done in 21 wasn't a riot. It was a slaughter.
So you tell me, how am I supposed to feel when you tell me just another young black brother has gotten killed? I feel nothing. I've become numb to it all. Desensitized to what I've come to know is just a fact of life. That every encounter I may have with the police might just be the day that I have to die.
Everything that you've ever done or said to justify your life as an objective, fair, just citizen of the human race is actually an admittance that you brought along fear to this intersection. Go ahead, say it. Confess it. I know it's in your pocket. Admit it. Admit it. Tell the truth. It's okay. It's just you and I here. You know you want to. If not, I'll do it for you. You've probably been to jail before, huh? Probably don't know who your father is. You probably were molested as a child. Your parents are rich. That's how you made it this far. Athletic scholarship, right? You demean Christianity in the name of Allah, huh? I'm sure you do. Which border? Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, or California? Get your hands out of your pocket. You sold drugs before, lied on an employment application. You probably slept with someone in management just to get this position, huh? Get your hands out of your pocket. When was the last time you were tested for AIDS? Back up, back up. I know your type of people. You people, your people, you people. Get your hands out of your pocket. I want to believe that you truly mean well. I do too. I want to. I want to love you. I want to think that everything I've ever been taught is not true. Don't move. Don't move. Oakland, click, click. Chicago, click, click. New York, click, click. London, click. Los Angeles, click. Cincinnati, Tulsa, Ferguson, click, bang, bang, the truth. I know you fear me. I've been taught to fear you too. The only thing in my pocket is my heart. It's my heart. Don't shoot.
I'm honored to be a graduate of Drew Theological School in Madison, New Jersey, but I did not begin my studies there. I began them in the Midwest at Ecumenical Theological Seminary in Detroit, Michigan. My oldest son was not quite 2 years old. My introduction to theology class was taught by a radical Roman Catholic nun. And it was thanks to her that I was first introduced to the theologian and martyr Dietrich Bonhoeffer. The more I read of this German Lutheran pastor, the more I came to admire and respect him. I wrote my very first seminary paper about him, in part because I was intrigued by his year of study at Union Theological Seminary, his opportunity to study with Reinhold Niebuhr, and his friendship with an African-American seminarian, Frank Field. It was a friendship that would lead him to teach at Abyssinian Baptist Church. He would teach Sunday school there and a woman's Bible study. He would learn about the struggles of Black people in America. He would hear Negro spirituals and listen to Black ministers preach a gospel of love and liberation amid the hostile environment of 1930s America. I was especially moved by the inspiration he found among Black people and our music and our struggles to live, and just as moved by the fact that he took what he learned with him and utilized it in a highly unlikely place, in Germany, in secret, just as Hitler was beginning his rise to power and his co-optation of the German Christian churches. My vision for our future has some roots in this, inspired by the story of a white German man who found strength and courage to resist the coming Nazi terror. He found that strength not only in God, but from the Black congregants that he met and taught at a historic Harlem congregation. Bonhoeffer read the sign of his time. He grieved for his country, but he had no time to despair. Instead, he prayed and he planned, and he partnered and he persisted, working against the Nazis until he was taken prisoner, writing and theologizing until he was murdered only a few weeks before Germany's surrender. My own social location is light years away from Bonhoeffer's cultured, upper-class German upbringing. As you know from yesterday, I am a child of the civil rights movement, the daughter of sharecroppers, and the granddaughter of enslaved people. I was born in Chicago to parents who came north in the Second Great Migration. I am the first generation of my family to graduate from elementary school. These achievements are a tribute not to me, but to the woman who gave birth to the woman who gave birth to the woman who gave birth to me, who partnered with God to shield me and to save me so that this life that I have might be mine to live. Raised in the stark contrast between the slums that housed me at night and the private school that educated me by day, I grew up just free enough to dream. To dream in the words of that Unitarian minister David Pohl, who wrote about an earth made fair with all her people one. It is fitting for me to be back here to talk in the Midwest where I began my seminary life. And I am no Bonhoeffer, and yet I feel a kinship with him that inspires my work. It is a kinship rooted in his time as the leader of a seminary at a time when the world he knew faced great peril. It would be a peril that asked of him an increasing amount. It was a peril that would eventually claim his life. For 2 years, however, he focused his attention on the creation of a secret seminary where men, and they were men then, who felt called by God could study and learn and embark on life together. It was his intent that they live together in Christian community, and the book that he wrote about that experience became his classic book, Life Together. One scholar wrote of this 2-year experiment, the seminarians were to live with one another, but only in the spirit of being for one another. His community was a gathering of theological students whose togetherness was to be characterized by an unselfish love for one another, expressed in the willingness to serve one another, even to be inconvenienced by one another, to intercede for one another in prayer, to extend forgiveness in the name of the Lord, and to share the bread of the Lord's Supper. I have to believe that there was fear in Bonhoeffer's heart, even as he helped to create this gathered community of ministerial resistance, working to build the confessing churches to stand against Hitler. We may have no Hitlers before us at this moment, but there is still much to fear in this world. It's crass materialism. It's overwhelming consumerism. It's vast contempt for the poor. It's contempt for the marginalized. It's seemingly unending reservoir of racist, misogynistic, homophobic, and transphobic hatred, so often rooted in a twisted rhetoric of faith. I am glad my ethics professor noted the importance of fear as a warning. We live in times worthy of our fear. We live in times worthy of our attention. My thoughts return again to Bonhoeffer, who in the face of the destruction of his secret seminary in Finkenwald, in the face of other work in Germany against the rising Nazi tide, was offered an avenue of escape, a chance to teach at his alma mater, Union, a chance to get out of Dodge, to carry on the fight from New York. His closest American friend, Paul Lehman, and his former teacher, Reinhold Niebuhr, were eager to rescue him from the fate of dissenters in Nazi Germany. Thus, they arranged for the tour with the unspoken intention that he would remain in America once the war began. And so he set sail for the United States on June 2nd, 1939. But the peace of his journey was disturbed by the thought of the persecution being faced by dissenting pastors. The Gettysburg Declaration of April 4th, 1939 had enjoined on all pastors the duty to devote themselves fully to the Führer's national political constructive work. It was becoming even more dangerous to be numbered among the enemies of the Third Reich. And Bonhoeffer's diary in that time is filled with expressions of anxiety. Why had he come to America when he was needed by the Christians of Germany? So he made up his mind to return. He departed on July 8th, 1939, a mere month after his arrival. I have made a mistake in coming to America, he said. I must live through this difficult period of our national history with the Christian people of Germany. I will have no right to participate in the reconstruction of Christian life in Germany after the war if I do not share the trials of this time with my people. It was a decision that would cost him his life. I do not believe that my service as the head of a seminary will cost me my life. At least I hope it won't. But I do believe, as I said last night, that this is an emergency. Our culture, our country, faces great peril. And I regard it as an honor to be leading a seminary, a place where religious leadership is formed at a time when we need progressive religious leadership desperately. I'm honored because the school that I serve, Star King, in Berkeley, California, has a history of progressive religious leadership, has evolved over many years to meet the challenge of its day, and trains not only ministers, but other progressive religious leaders, not just Unitarian Universalists, but people who are Muslim and Buddhist and atheist and Sikh and Sufi and pagan. We prepare people for life in nonprofits of all kinds, but we also prepare them for the life of the church because we need progressive religious leaders in the church. We need people who are comfortable with the examination of oppression. One of our core values is to educate, to counter oppression, and to lift up the principle of intersectionality in all of the work that we do. One oppression resonates with others, has a synergistic effect on the others. And to understand one, you need to understand all of them and the way that they relate to one another and reinforce one another. It is a core principle of the work that we do with our students. It is not easy work, and not everyone can do it. Not everyone can face it. I wish I had gone to Star King, but I made up for it by serving on the board first, 20 years ago, where I first learned about this amazing little place. And so it is a double honor for me to lead it now. I feel that you should meet some of the people in this room who have benefited from a Star King education. So those of you who have, would you raise your hands, please? Talk to them. Yes, applaud. Talk to them about what they learned. Talk to them about the way it informs their ministry. Speak to them about what it means to be educated to counter oppression, to have as a focus of your education the creation of just and sustainable community, and how that works in their daily life, both in the parish and in the larger community. Ministerial formation is one of the key ways we can begin to make change. It is not the only way, but it is a key way. And one of the things that we hear at Star King from people who graduate from the school is how powerfully they feel prepared to do work at this time and in these places in the United States and elsewhere, because we have graduates around the world. Also, there is a sense of unease because not every congregation is ready for a religious leader prepared to do this work. I asked last night, how many of you believe that your congregations are ready for religious leaders prepared to do this work? How many of you believe your congregation is? How many of you believe your congregation is not? Look around. As a seminary leader, that concerns me. As a citizen of the world, that concerns me. As a Black woman in America, that concerns me.
Thank you, Rosemary. Rosemary, I just want to add my 2 cents to the fact that I am so thankful that you agreed to serve as the president of Star King. You are the right person. You know, just hearing you talk this morning, it reaffirms my deep sense that you're the right person at the right time, and we are so fortunate, and those who saw you were the one to lead this school at this time. They knew what they were doing, and they know what they're doing, and we as Unitarian Universalists know what we're doing, and I want you to know you have my complete support, and I want to say to everybody, I hope that you will get behind Rosemary and her leadership of our seminary, how important it is, and this is the time. This is not the time for us to be divided about our leadership,
and not the time for us to be pulling away support from one of our most significant seminaries. And so we're behind you. I just want you to know you have our support. I want to say a word about intersectionality, and then show another clip of some things that we've been doing in Tulsa, because today I want to be a little more practical, so I wanted to show you the poets and say this is something that you can do in your congregation, even if you don't have much diversity in your congregation. It brings in people, because they bring their friends and they bring their family, and hey, come hear me, I'm going to be delivering a poem at a church, and all of a sudden you start having a reputation in the community as a church that allows these things to happen, gives people a platform, gives artists a platform, and you can do this a lot with the arts. You can do this with dance and poetry and music, and it's a great way to bring worship alive, make worship more vibrant and interesting, and also draw on the community around you and the diversity around you to begin to make your church more significant in the life of whatever town or city you're in. Someone was asking about, there was this metaphor of the fishing boat last night, and how we got to where we were. A big part of that was our welcoming congregations work. So when I came, our congregation wasn't an official welcoming congregation, and there was even some resistance to it, quite frankly. And we moved that process forward and did it very intentionally over 4 years. There was a lot of work that went into it. It wasn't just we're going to do this for a year and check it off and hang up the poster and be welcoming. It was a very deep process, and that work on those particular oppressions made a big difference when it came to the coming together of these two churches and having to have conversations about oppression and how it works. So that's the welcoming congregation process is another process through it that readied us for the moment that when Bishop Pearson came to All Souls. And then, so let me see here. So this is our church. You can see it's a very traditional looking church with a bell tower, a white painted brick, New England style church in the middle of the country. It had been for 88 years predominantly white. Very, very white. White on the outside. As Bishop Pearson says, white on the outside and white on the inside. And then Bishop Pearson came, one of the great Pentecostal leaders of our times, somebody who, as I said last night, has had an immense influence on the black churches. Really the only, I'll say it again, the only thriving and growing Black Baptist churches in America today are those that were influenced by him and his Azusa movement, that Baptist pastors would go off to this conference and they would be so moved and they would say, I'm bringing that music. I know that it's not our tradition and we're not supposed to, but I'm bringing that music back to my church. And they brought praise music into the black churches. And there are African-American Baptist churches where the congregation doesn't want to bring that music in, and those churches are dying. They're becoming museums. And it's really interesting the impact that he's had on religious life. And the fact that he's hanging with us Unitarian Universalists right now is an incredible thing. He's preaching once a month in Tulsa in our contemporary service. And he's just an incredible person and a great minister. And so what I wanted to talk about was, this is some photos of the recent Martin Luther King Day parade. We try to have a presence in all the Martin Luther King Day parade, the Pride Parade, and those kinds of events. And that's another way that we're out there in the public, being seen, being recognized. And it's another reason why Bishop Pearson said, this is a church where my folks would feel comfortable and could belong and get behind it. This is our float, which a few years ago, our youth group and some members made this float, which looks like a mini version of our church. You can see the steeple and everything. And so we've been using it over and over again. And in this year's Pride Parade, or last year's Pride Parade, we did a mock same-sex wedding. So I was there in a collar and my stole and everything. And then we had all these same-sex couples. And this was before it was legal in Oklahoma. And that was it was a wonderful Thank you. It was a wonderful way to express our values very publicly, very colorfully in the community. And the other thing we did around that was when the law to make same-sex marriage legal in Oklahoma was in the courts, we had a lot of politicians, including our governor, saying this is not what the people of Oklahoma want. We don't want this. You know, we're a Christian state and all those kinds of things. And so what we did was we held an engagement party for same-sex couples at our church, and we opened it up to the entire state, and we publicized it, and we had 33 couples come to announce their engagement. And what surprised us more than anything was we had 37 clergy from different denominations and different churches around Oklahoma who came and stood with us for this engagement party. Jewish and Christian and Unitarian Universalist, and we said to Oklahoma, we're ready. When the law passes, we want the gay and lesbian community to know and the state of Oklahoma to know there are many churches and many clergy who are ready to start doing these weddings. And so it's what has been called an ethical spectacle. We're trying to create an ethical spectacle where we create a spectacle that gets the news media's attention on an issue that we believe needs to be talked about. And so that's what this is about. And so this is an example here on this year's Martin Luther King Day parade. So the theme was, there's always a theme of the parade. It's the third largest Martin Luther King Day parade in the country in Tulsa. And the theme was celebrate change. So you have to have the word celebrate change on your float somewhere. And we were not feeling very celebratory this year in January in light of all of the killings of African-American males by law enforcement. We saw more mobilization on the streets of America around issues of race this past year than we have since the Civil Rights Movement. We had die-ins at the Capitol and at the Mall of America. We're saying celebrate change. We're not sure what we're celebrating right now, and so we weren't sure how to deal with that. So finally, in some brainstorming, we decided we're gonna put celebrate change and a big question mark. And we said our theme's gonna be about ending the new Jim Crow. And so we had some very graphic. You'll see some pictures. Let's see what's the next slide has. You'll see some. I'm gonna show you a little video clip. But we have on the back we had two black hands in handcuffs tattooed on the hands. End the new Jim Crow, and just the words "the new Jim Crow" on the side of our float. Join us to help end the new Jim Crow was going through the black part of town in Tulsa was a pretty big deal. Nobody else, there was no other float that was like a protest float. And we caught a lot of crap for it, both inside our church and outside our church. People saying, "What are you doing? This isn't the moment for that. You don't create a protest. This is more, you're supposed to honor Martin Luther King." And so you're going to insult the organizers of the parade and all this other stuff. So we were catching flack from our own people and people in the wider community for what we did. And so we got these hoodies that on the back, you'll see in a second, on the back, let's see, well, I'll show you the clip first. On the back it says, "Don't shoot, seek the truth and love." And that's part of our covenant, seek the truth and love. So we asked people a couple weeks before the parade if they wanted to march with us and if they wanted to order a hoodie. And so 140 of our members ordered the hoodies and marched with us. And we had, but we got a lot of grief about this, even from within inside our church, on our Facebook page and everything, members saying, "I'm not comfortable with this. Why are we saying don't shoot? Why can't we say," and people had all kinds of other ideas, "We love everybody," or, something. And we're saying, no, this is what we're doing. But it was difficult, and it definitely created a conflict. But we've learned some skills around how to have these dialogues and conflicts. Nevertheless, when we went to the parade, we decided, part of our parade every year for the last few years we've brought on a drum kit, and Pastor David Smith, our African-American music director, with his keyboard, and some of our singers, and we sing Black gospel music and praise music and other songs in our float as we're going by. And what's been wonderful every year is that everybody knows these songs in the crowd, and so as we come by, everybody starts singing with us and putting their hands up, and it just becomes this great. I've always wanted to have a video camera on the float so we could take a picture of all the people, because you see them just sitting there, maybe eating something, and all of a sudden our float comes along and they just start singing and dancing and saying, all right, yeah, who is that, what church is that? And so we had all that ready, and we thought, how are we going to deal with this with what we're doing? And so we decided that we would just stop the music every once in a while, in the middle of the song. Whenever the float stopped, you know how floats stop through a parade, we would cut the music wherever we were, and we would everybody, 140 of us, would put our hoods up and put our hands up and just stand there in silence. And what happened, and we didn't know this would happen, but the people around us in the crowd, once they realized, it was so shocking, and once they realized what was happening, they looked, they said, hey, put your hands up, and everybody, kids and everything, stood there with us in solidarity, putting their hands up. And then when the parade started going again, the music started, we took down our hoods, we started dancing and moving, and everybody just started cheering behind us. But we created this spontaneous sense of solidarity and mass protest, and it just broke the silence on an issue that wasn't being talked about in our community. And all of a sudden, this parade became a significant moment for everybody who was in our church and in this float, including our children who were part of this, as well as the people in the community. So it was so moving. That silence and that moment when other people all raised their hands and stuff, and there were police in full, not quite riot gear, but full bulletproof vests and all their equipment and guns, who were standing there too. Well, we were all standing up. They were throughout the crowd. And it was an intense time. So what we wanted to do was bring that back to worship so that the rest of the congregation could have some experience of what we experienced. So let me show you a little clip of the parade first. And that was the best. Thank you. There are some clips on Facebook from people in the crowd, and you can hear the other voices. People say, "Hey, put your hands up! Hey, what church is that? That's a church. All right, that's what I'm talking about." And so, just some great commentary from the folks in the out in the. As you can see on the back, it says "Celebrate Change?" ? And you can see the hands with the handcuffs on the back of the float there. So then we decided, well, how do we bring this into the church? And so we got all the 140 marchers who were available that Sunday, the next Sunday, to come and participate in a service with us. And in this, you can see people marching in down the center aisle together. So during the prelude, we played the same kinds of songs that we played on the float, and then we all marched in. And then the music stopped once we were filling the whole center aisle, and we just did the same thing in silence, raised our hand. What's interesting, you can see in this photo, this was coming in. This is our first service, which is predominantly white. It's our traditional UU service. And what you see is nobody else is putting their hands up, right? They're just watching. They're not sure what's going on. But when we left, at the end, we did the same thing on the way out. And when we put our hands up, everybody put their hands up with us. And it was a powerful moment to feel. We felt the same thing in the church that we had felt out on the streets, that sense of solidarity, that sense that we're in this together. And it was a beautiful moment. So I want to show you a little clip of us coming in during that early service that we have.
Talking, marching up the freedom line. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on the freedom line. Ain't gonna let injustice turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let injustice turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking. Marching on the freedom line. Ain't gonna let no hatred turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no hatred turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on.
So if you remember from last night, what I was saying, the two things that I'm hoping, the two goals I have for the session today is, number one, to show that we can do this kind of thing. We already have churches that are doing this, and our churches can begin to be more like this across the board if we want to. I don't, because people have this idea, well, our faith can't do that, or our theology can't hold that, or our churches or tradition can't. It's not true. It can. We have a container that can do this kind of ministry, can do multicultural ministry, strong justice ministries, both outside and inside the church. And I know many of us are doing it in different ways. So I just want to encourage that and really give that sort of witness to this possibility. And then also talking about the struggles, as we did a lot last night, of what it takes and the difficulty to get there. So anything you want to jump in?
I want to circle back a little bit to intersectionality. From the 13 years that I was at Fourth Universalist in New York City. Fourth Universalist Society in the city of New York? Oh, intersectionality. Well, I thought I did that before, but let me try again. Because it is not an ordinary term for the vast majority of the world. Intersectionality is the principle that oppressions connect. So think of your fingers like this, that they reinforce one another. So that one kind of oppression reinforces the other, and that they often work together. Race works together with class issues. Class works together with gender issues. They combine and recombine in a variety of ways. And understanding that and working against the sexism and the racism and the homophobia and the transphobia and the classism that we all have seen is what we try to teach at Star King, and what many of you are working on in your own congregations and in your own communities. So in the years that I was at Fort U, it's New York City, it's the Upper West Side, so it's a pretty liberal group. I really didn't have a lot of trouble talking about race. And I never had trouble at all talking about LGBTQ issues. My congregation had, even though my congregation was not a welcoming congregation till about 5 years into my tenure there, because no one had ever bothered. Their attitude was, well, we've had gay and lesbian people in leadership since the 1950s, so I don't see why we have to do this. So, and I really had to explain to them, so you're looking for civil union, a same-sex marriage ceremony, even if it's not legal in New York State, and you go onto the UUA site and you look for the rainbow, and you see All Souls and it has the rainbow chalice, and you see Community Church and it has the rainbow chalice, and you see Fort U and you don't see a rainbow chalice. And then you walk by Fort U and you see this big Gothic cathedral-like building. Which one are you going to go to? So I really had to explain that piece of it, but it was kind of a weird flip. Like, we don't need this. But it was a fascinating experience. In New York State, in the year 2004, the New York State Assembly held the first hearings in the state about marriage equality. And I remember it because it was on March 3rd, 2004, because that was my 20th wedding anniversary. So the day before, I preached a sermon in my congregation saying that I was going to Albany to testify. And I might not have used the language at that time, but it was for me a clear idea about how oppressions connect and how privilege gets leveraged. Because all of us are privileged and or marginalized at any given time. As a Black woman, as a woman, I have experienced lots of marginalization in my life. As a straight woman, as a married woman, I have a certain amount of privilege. So this was a time for me to use that privilege in the service of marriage equality. And I really wanted to be able to say in this hearing that that day was my 20th wedding anniversary, and that everybody had a right to a 20th wedding anniversary, no matter who they were or who they loved. And it was really cool to be able to say that. We did have to push back our anniversary dinner because I didn't get back from Albany until late at night. So I said, Bob, can you move the reservation? My train gets in at this time. But he's been married to me for a long time, so he knows. And he cares about this stuff too. But that's an example of how you can use that. And so I could get the people in my congregation to ride with me on Equality Day on the bus to Albany to take letters from the congregation to representatives about why we needed marriage equality in the state. And they knew I was committed because the buses left at 5 a.m. and I am not a morning person. So they knew I was sincere. So by the time we were ready to talk about things like Occupy, because that was a huge moment in the life of New York City, I could get 40 of my people, 25 to 40, depending on which day it was, to go to the interfaith service in Zuccotti Park with a variety of people and help them understand some of the issues around economic inequality. Doing a multi-generational service about economic inequality. How do you talk about this to kids? Well, our DRE at the time and a couple of other people got together and built this gigantic Monopoly game. And the kids got to be the life-size pieces. And we moved them around and explained to people how Monopoly got played and what it meant. And everything was fine until I remembered that I had a banker in my congregation who was less than thrilled with my presentation. So you always find out where the sensitive points are as you do your work, and you have to remain in relationship with people. And that was a hard lesson for me. Remaining in relationship with people who I think are wrong was hard for me. I had greater expectations of my people. I wanted more from them, and I expected more from them. So I had to get right around what my right relationship was with them. I'm still their pastor, even if I think they're wrong. I have to love them, even if I think they're wrong. And that is why ministry is not for everyone, as my husband likes to remind me on many occasions. That's why you're the minister, Rosemary, and not me. It's not easy to do, but it's crucial in our work. It is crucial in our work. And it's crucial in our work whether you're a minister or not. If you're a member of a congregation and you're engaged in a passionate discussion about the great issues of our time, and you are in relationship with people in your congregation who feel very differently than you do, the big challenge for us as people of faith is to stay in relationship. It's hard.
Beautiful. That's it. I forgot to mention that the Martin Luther King Commemorative Society that puts on the parade every year, it's a contest too for the best float, and they voted our float the #1 float in the parade. So that helped put to bed the controversy within our church about whether we were doing the right thing and whether we were honoring Dr. King or not and all that. So that was helpful to get that outside endorsement. I want to talk about this briefly. This is another thing. We did a commemorative service back after James Reeb was killed in 1965, after Bloody Sunday and all of that, when pastors were coming down to Selma to march. My predecessor, Dr. John Wolfe, and his colleagues, and most of his colleagues in Tulsa decided we have a need for a march right here in Tulsa as much as they needed in Selma. And we're going to stay here, and we're going to create a service and a march. And that's what they did. So that was their response. And this happened in a lot of cities around the country. What was happening in Selma had a ripple effect all over the country. So that was 50 years ago, and they held a service at All Souls, in part because most of those pastors couldn't just go to their congregations or their congregational leaders and say, we're going to have a service. We're going to bring in the Jews and the Catholics and the Baptists. We're going to bring in black and white. They told me that in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 1965, it was more radical to have the Southern Baptists and the Catholics worshiping together as it was to have black and white pastors in the community worshiping together. But this was the first interfaith service in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the first public interracial service that was led together, and it was held at All Souls because Dr. Wolfe was able to say, we can do it at my church without there being any big controversy. And so we held that. So we decided, this is about building on the past. That's the theme of this little section. And that is that most of our churches that have been around this long were very active in the civil rights movement and have been very active in the marriage equality movement and things like that. So this is about making sure that we continue to tell those stories, and that when we're taking a new social justice stand, that we're doing it in a way that we say, we're just doing what we do. This is what we do. This is what we've been doing, and always building on the ministers who came before us and the congregants and the lay leaders and the congregation's history, because that gives us a lot of moral authority with our own people as well as with the community. So we decided to do a commemorative service last month, and we brought together the ministers. There's Dr. Wolfe and I coming in. We brought together the ministers from the different churches that were involved 50 years ago. And some of those congregations and their ministers do not get involved in interfaith work anymore. But we said, it was your predecessor, 50 years, we're doing this Selma commemorative thing. And so a lot of them got involved again and had an incredible experience. And we had over 50 clergy from different denominations march with us to come in to this service, investments. And it was a beautiful night and a great service. And this is what Dr. Wolfe, he's the last living clergy person from that service in 1965. And we shot a video of him because his health isn't good, and we wanted to make sure his voice was there. And he told the story of that service and how it came about in 1965. But he was able to make it that night. And after the video, he stood up and just said these short remarks.
Bless you all. I am so grateful that you're here. My clergy, my friends, brethren, sister. If Rabbi Rosenthal were here, he'd say, John, but you forgot one thing. The most important thing. The reason we didn't go to Selma, But when Clarence said, why don't we stay here? Tulsa needs this more than Selma does. That was because 44 years before, we had Selma here. We had Bloody Sunday here. The Tulsa race riots. And nobody said anything. The pulpits were silent. Never again. You are here because never again.
So that's a real charge to all of us. That we have a freedom of the pulpit, and our ministers can say anything they feel is absolutely important from our pulpits, and we need to use that in this time, and we need to remember the freedom of the pulpit and know that we need to speak out on the issues of our times. And a lot of pastors will say this, that Sunday morning in their pulpit is the scariest hour of the whole week, because they're afraid to say both what they believe as well as what they think about social and political issues. But we don't have that problem. We are charged with saying what we really believe and speaking out. And so as lay people, we need to encourage our ministers to use the freedom of the pulpit and to do, as Dr. Wolf said, not be silent on the important issues, because as Rosemary said, it is really important right now. People are dying, people are suffering and struggling, and we can speak out. We've got these free pulpits, and it's so important what we're doing. So I want to encourage everybody to build on the history you have, honor the people who've come before, and continue to use our freedom of the pulpit.
I want to circle back once again, and you reminded me because you were talking about the interfaith work that you were doing there. And one of the most important things that Star King does is work very hard on multi-religious life and learning. 2/3 of our students are Unitarian Universalist, but 1/3 of our students are Sikh and Muslim and Buddhist and pagan. And one of the things that's most important for us is to have a conversation, a real conversation, particularly around the progressive elements of the faiths of the world. We have Sufi Muslim teachers and students, and there is a great deal of work being done around the Muslim communities of Northern California and actually globally. One of the most popular classes that we teach is actually an immersion that we do every 2 years, that is led by our provost, Ibrahim Farajage, who is himself Sufi. And he takes our students and others to Turkey, to Konya, to the home of Rumi. And they spend 12 days immersed in Sufi life, in Sufi faith, and it culminates with the celebrations that go on in Turkey on the anniversary of Rumi's death. We have other immersions planned in other parts of the world because we consider our responsibility to train and raise up progressive leaders who are multivocal and multi-theological and multi-religious, who are comfortable working with people in a variety of faith traditions, because that's the world in which we are going to be living. And certainly the world our children will be living. So we require a kind of versatility that previous generations felt they didn't necessarily feel that they needed, but it's urgently needed now. I'm glad to talk to you all later today. I have a workshop later, and I'm happy to talk about Star King and the way we educate people and to answer any questions and to encourage you to take a class, because the other things that we do are teach online. And we've been teaching online a variety of things since 2000. So we're good at it. We teach a lot of different things, and you'd be amazed about what you can learn online, very much around some of the things that we've been talking about this morning. So please find me if you'd like to learn more. But please be aware that there is this multi-religious need that we are going to have to embrace as well, that being Unitarian Universalist will increasingly mean being conversant with not only Buddhism and not only Judaism, but Islam and with pagan identities that we may not be as familiar with as others. And I hope that you'll pursue that in the communities where you work and serve.
Thank you. I wanted to say one more thing before I go on to maybe another clip or two before we close up this morning. And just say one of the things that we've been doing, one of the most important things in this work, and one of the most important things that our country needs right now are white folks who get what's going on and understand privilege and whiteness and all of those things. And so that is just should be a core curriculum that all of our churches are teaching. And you don't need to have any people of color in your congregation in order to have classes on witnessing whiteness and what does whiteness mean. Witnessing Whiteness is a great resource. It's a book. There's a book and a curriculum called Witnessing Whiteness, which can be used, and you get groups together and have some facilitators. It is just, that's critical, and that's what sets us up to being ready to broaden out our congregations. And let me make a real clear point on this. So we're doing this now. We have what we call rewire classes. It used to be called Witnessing Whiteness. They just changed the name. But this is white folks talking to other white folks doing a 10-month curriculum around what does it mean to be white, where did whiteness come from, what does it mean to identify as white, how did your people get white, what are your experiences with race. So it's a really amazing, transformative year curriculum. And we also have in our church a companion program called Mosaic for people of color doing their own work. They've been using the book Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria as their sort of curriculum as they talk about what does it mean to be a person of color in a predominantly white congregation, in a predominantly white world. What are my early stories? What are the stories I still tell myself? How do these issues and emotions come up for me? How do I deal with them? Am I being effective? All those kinds of great conversations. So at the end of the year, we get the groups together to have a conversation about their experience. And after we did this the first year, I was having a beautiful conversation with everybody. And then afterward, having a conversation with a few people. And this woman of color, she was she's Sri Lankan American. So just to say, it's not all black and white. She said, what I would love is if people on their name tag who've been through the Witnessing Whiteness, that was what it was called at the time, class, could have a little something that symbolized that they've been through the class. And she said, because I feel so much safer around them because I know that they understand what's going on. And I know that if they were to say something that would create one of those ick moments that people of color have in predominantly white settings, when someone says something that just triggers something or just feels bad, and an us and them comment or something like that, that she said, I would know that I could just say to that person, hey, do you know how that made me feel? And that they wouldn't get defensive. They would know how to respond, and we could have a dialogue right there in the foyer of the church, and it would not be an ick moment. It would actually be a really positive moment. And so I would love to know who are the people who get it and who are safe. But I say this just to say that's how profoundly important it is for white folks to be doing this work and really understand it, because it makes our congregations be able to really, truly welcome people of color into our midst in a way that feels safe. One of the conversations we had in the first year of this coming together, all the white folks in the church wanted to have a person of color who they were close with or make a friend, and and they were sometimes disappointed that that it wasn't happening so quickly. You know, can you create some opportunities? Because I want, and you know, we laugh, but it's true, right? There's this hunger for a lot of white folks to have an African American friend. You know, if they have no contact, many people have no contact with African Americans or people of other races in their life. They don't bring them into their homes for meals. They don't share a lot of things together. So there's this great hunger, but it's not fair to people of color coming into our congregations to all of a sudden have to play that role for people. And a woman in a video, there was some video we were showing early on, and I remembered this African American woman telling this story about how she said, what white folks don't realize is that for me, anyway, she was saying, and for many African Americans, when we decide to reach our hand out again and say, okay, I'll try to be friends with you, to a new white person and a new relationship like that, she said, we have to step over all the broken shards of glass of all the relationships like this that went wrong before. Shakti Butler, Making Whiteness Visible. Yeah, thank you. And she said, and say, okay, I'm going to try it again. I'm going to put my trust in this person's not going to do what the last person did. And so we just have to remember, and what I had to say to the congregation is every African American who's coming into our church does not need new white friends. They have white people in their lives. So they have a very different need that they're bringing, you know, to the table. And we have to understand that and respect that. But those are the kind of honest conversations that we need to have and talk about. Talk about the yearning in white folks to have friends and the sadness about not having those connections in our lives and things like that. Because we got to connect with that sadness and that pain, because it's out of that yearning and that longing that we'll be driven to do the hard work that it takes in order to make our congregations welcoming. Okay. So I just want to show you, I brought a couple, I wasn't sure where we would go with all this conversation, so I thought I'd show you a couple of things that we're doing to, this is something that's become a signature program for us. Every year in February during Black History Month, we do a service which tells the story of America through black music. It's an incredible story that we have a woman in our church, African-American woman, who's a professor at the University of Tulsa named Dr. Teresa Reed, who has a book called The Sacred and the Profane in Black Music. So she helped us write the script for this. And we start with African music, African drums and dancing, and then we go right into slave songs, really authentic slave songs, and then we go all the way through all the genres of music, the jazz and the blues and rock and soul and hip hop, eventually with hip hop, you know, rappers and break dancers and things. So, and we tell the story of the impact both in the churches and outside of the church. We also do gospel and praise, and we take everybody's spirituals. And so it's a powerful service. I just want to give you this, show you this little promo clip so you can see what we're doing. But this has been, we do it once in the morning for our church, and then we open it up to the whole community for folks who have other churches that they go to in the morning, and the church is just packed in the afternoon with people, and then that service is predominantly African American because folks have heard about this and they want to experience it. From the heights of rich African humanity to the depths of sick American barbarity, in the whirlwind of white supremacy, black people preserve their sanity and dignity. What a story.
What a story. What a people.
So those words that I was saying actually come from Cornell West, who's going to be our Ware lecturer at General Assembly this year. He's incredible. He's got a beautiful CD called Sketches of My Culture, I believe it's called. And it's a wonderful CD. And it was actually the first song on that CD that got us to, it was the origination of this idea, because I love that song, which tells this story in about 7 minutes. And I just was asking the music directors if we could do that song. And then next thing you know, we're saying, well, why don't we just do a whole service on this? And we brought in all these musicians and created this service. And it's been really a powerful and meaningful tradition for us to offer this to the community and each year to make it better and better. I don't know what you do for Black History Month or Women's History Month or any of those things, but again, it's a great opportunity to bring the social justice issues into the congregation, to bring guests into the congregation, and to invite the community to come into the congregation.
We're almost done with our time. I have gotten the signal that we have a little less than 15 minutes. That's right. So before anything else, I want to thank Marlon for this fabulous presentation. I have been totally jealous of the stuff that you get to do from the moment I first went to Tulsa a few years ago. And we were talking this morning about all the ideas I got last night while I was listening to all this and thinking, I'm not in a congregation, I can't do this stuff in church, so now I have to take it back to school and teach it to everybody so we can get them to do it in their own churches. But I want to make sure that we get a chance, I guess, to do questions. And if there were people from last night who really need to ask us stuff, you should come on up. And we don't have long, but we want to make sure that if you have burning questions, this would be the time to ask them. And we're going to hold to our time, so I'm already going to apologize for us not being able to get to every question, because I see all of y'all lining up, and this is not looking promising.
Sit, so you don't have to stand. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Barrett. I'm from First Unitarian Society of Madison. So you're number one, we're number two, 36 members, right? Behind you. So Dr. Reverend Bray McNabb, I'm so glad you said that about the jealousy. I also, when I first heard what you're doing, I said, oh my gosh, I'm there, I'm moving to Tulsa. Well, can't do it. So how are our other large congregations going to be doing this? I know you do an online service, so we can watch it, but our other large congregations, can you come visit? I mean, what do we need to get that energy? Our ministers are here. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Sure, come visit. We'd love to have you come visit us. I'm not sure coming to your church would be that helpful, but we also we live stream our services every Sunday, so it's a chance to view our services online. And some churches around the country have started to use our later service. They live stream it as a second service, so they're launching a second service by using our live feed, and they have local people inside the church who will kind of pass the baskets and do the announcements for them while the announcements are going on for us. And so they basically found a way to launch a second service within the life of their church, which is very different from what they're doing. And their members, some of their members are really interested in it and have enjoyed doing that. So that's one way you might think about it.
Reverend Dr. Findlay C. Campbell from First Unitarian Church of Chicago. My preamble is here. You can get it at the door. My question is very simple. Do you believe that anti-Black racism hurts politically, economically, and morally the average white brother and sister, whether as student, professional, or worker?
Can you say that one more time? What's the first? I missed the first word. Anti-what?
Anti-Black racism hurts politically, economically, and morally the average white worker, student, or professional.
So anti-black racism might be just what most of us think of as racism, related particularly to African Americans. Is that right? Anti-black. Okay. I just haven't heard that phrase. It's sometimes seems like a double negative. Okay.
I don't blame you, Marlon. No, Finley, I don't.
My name is Lori Stone-Sertosky. I am with a covenanting community in Indianapolis called Sacred Path. I'm a lay leader. My question, I previewed with Reverend Lavinar last night, is related to a criticism that I have heard when we try to bring in this kind of style in predominantly white congregations about how we deal with co-opting of culture and cultural exchange, and where are those lines when we're doing this kind of work with worship.
This is a long-standing conversation, and my beloved friend of blessed memory, Marjorie Bones Wheatley, wrote a wonderful essay about this called Cornrows, Kwanzaa, and Confusion. My husband helped her write that title, actually. I remember that. And it's actually on the UUA website. And it talks very clearly about the history of cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. And I think it would be useful for congregations that are struggling around that to use that essay as a starting point, because she was one of the earliest people to write about this and lifted up some of these conversations. It's not the only thing you can use, but it's one of the best things I think you can use. I think it's Kwanzaa, Cornrows, and Confusion. Marjorie Bones Wheatley. And I like the idea that Marjorie still lives with us through her work.
The only thing I would add is just that as we come to have the conversation, I just hope that folks will be gentle and give people the benefit of the doubt. I think sometimes in our communities, we can become real self-righteous and kind of sanctimonious about how we have these conversations. And, you know, it's almost like there's certain people who love to just at the end of a service go run up to the minister or the music director or somebody and tell them how wrong they were and how they should not have used that. And that's really, people are, everything we put out there, we're putting out with love. Every minister, every layperson, every music director, we're putting out there with great love and heart and soul. And we make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And it's just really important that those who we're in relationship with will talk to us about their concerns and how it made them feel, but do so in the spirit of love and not from a sort of self-righteous, kind of bitter way, because that doesn't really create any sense of creativity, and it really dampens the conversation, in my opinion.
Chip Roush, I serve the First Unitarian Church of South Bend, Indiana. Thank you both. Taking prophetic stands sometimes causes people to move away from the church. I tell myself that's okay. What's your experience, either at Fourth Universalist or in Tulsa, about people leaving around this work?
Yeah, we've had people leave, not as many as I would have thought, but it's something we can't be worried about that. You know, people have to take responsibility for themselves. We need to try to stay in relationship, and we need to try to do it in a loving way. I think we're better to the degree we can keep people in the conversation, because they're just going to go to find another congregation or community that reaffirms their biases, and then they're just going to die with whatever hole is in their soul that made them leave. So I think we try, but I think we cannot try to hide our light or hide our voice on prophetic issues. And what Dr. Wolf told me, and this is what's been really important, is that he thought he had people leave the church. There was conflicts the whole time, and that's what I was saying yesterday about let's not just tell our victory stories And that's why I appreciated Rob and Danny talking about the tensions that came up around this incredible Selma event that you all created, because that's what it's really like on the ground. And if we only tell the victory story, we don't realize how painful it is, so that when those painful moments happen, we feel like, oh my God, we're doing this wrong, we're never gonna get there, this is terrible, when actually that's how the folks who got us where we are, they had to go through those moments too. I've told this story about Dr. Wolf. He preached a sermon that helped with the integration of schools. It was a real dramatic moment. It was printed in the newspaper the next day. I've told that story for 15 years, and then this year, in preparation for the Selma commemorative service, I found the article, and what I thought the newspaper, I told it like the newspaper lifted him up as a hero, speaking truth to power. The newspaper said how absolutely inappropriate it was, how he used his pulpit, how demeaning, how wrong he was, and it was scathing, and it was clipped out and sent in with a letter from a member of the congregation saying, she underlined all the words about inappropriate, absolutely defiled the pulpit and all that, and she said, I couldn't agree more. And so he was getting attacked from inside the church, from outside the church, but we don't tell that part of the story. We just talk about him as this heroic minister. And when I learned that, it made me feel a lot better about the conflicts we had to deal with around the Martin Luther King Day parade this year.
The one thing I learned is that sometimes those people come back. They don't all come back, and I'm not always sorry about that. So let's be real. Sometimes they need to go. But sometimes it's that they have to develop in a way that will allow them to return. And I feel blessed that I've been able to see people do that in the course of my ministry.
And it's the same around Jesus. I've had a lady who stayed in our church for a couple of years as we've brought more of that into our congregation through this exchange. And she said, I finally realized, I was so mad about this for a while, and then I realized it's not Jesus I don't like. He's actually he's an amazing man, an amazing teacher, a radical, and everything that I love. She said, it's not Jesus I don't like, it's my mother-in-law who tried to jam a version of Jesus down my throat. So we're being told we have 2 minutes, and we have 4 people, so we're not going to get to everybody's question, but we'll try to do our best to get to 1 or 2 more.
Hi, my name is Terry Wiggins. I'm from First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. This is a really hard question to ask and may seem even inappropriate, but it's kind of where my passion lies.
Hey, can I just ask you to take a second? I know we don't have a lot of time. If you're worried that the question you're going to ask is inappropriate, I just want you to take a second to really think, is it the right question to be asking right now? You're the last person, maybe the last person to speak, and if you feel like it might be inappropriate, maybe it is, and maybe you don't want to ask it. So I just want you to think about that. Are you sure you want to ask it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do. It's sorry. It's another one of those overlapping oppressions that we have going on in our society. And that really is how we live our 7th principle and how we treat our earth. As much as all of this race issue is important, it's the context. The earth is the context for all of this, and so I'm wondering how the 7th principle aspects are taught at Star King.
Oh, thanks. Great. It is a good question. I actually think about this question a lot. We teach quite a bit about our 7th principle and about the earth. Remember, it's California. We're in a drought. So we have no choice but to think about these issues. And they're taught pretty regularly and lifted up pretty regularly. If you want to talk to me later, I have a longer, more complex response about how I feel about the way in which issues around climate change affect people of color and whether or not we regard that as a greater priority or a lesser priority. So.
Thank you. It's a good question, and the reason that I asked you, I've had in a number of cases somebody come up in a setting like this and say, this question might be inappropriate, and then it really was, and it really created an awful moment for everybody. So I've said to myself, if anyone ever does that again, I'm going to ask them to take a minute and make sure. So thank you for letting me do that. So we're out of time, but thank you all so much, and Rosemary, thank you for everything.